Ad Astra, Latin for To the Stars, stars Brad Pitt and Tommy Lee Jones and was directed by James Gray. This was a film that I thought was really meaningful. It was a film that I really enjoyed. I took a lot from it, and I've been excited to discuss it in this review. I will talk about it in reference to spoilers, certain things that happen in the film. Now, having said that, I don't think it's a film necessarily with lots of plot twists that you wouldn't want to know going in. But nonetheless, if you want to go into the film clean, then this review might not be for you. Now, the plot of the film is set in not too distant future, perhaps the late 21st century. Tommy Lee Jones plays an astronaut who is part of a mission to travel to the furthest edge of the solar system and scan for extraterrestrial life. The mission fails. It disappears off the face of the charts, and everyone on it is presumed dead. Until 30 years later, his son, played by Brad Pitt, also an astronaut, is asked by the authorities to help them out when a series of cosmic events starts happening with its source on the edge of the solar system. Now, they believe that it could be because Tommy Lee Jones's character is still alive. Now, as I said, I really like this film. I tend to view films as experiences. I like to look at the big picture. I look holistically at the film as a whole. So if there's individual problems with the film, if there's plot holes, for instance, it doesn't tend to bother me too much. I'm still able to look at the film as a whole and see what there is to enjoy. And overall, that is how I look at this film. I enjoy it for the overall experience that it is. However, there are issues with the film, and it's so frustrating because this film really spoke to me. I really loved the experience of watching it. There was a lot in the film that I thought was just so well done. I really liked it. It was classic science fiction, but there's just a collection of inconsistencies in the plot and in the characters and in the science of the film, which cumulatively really started to bring the film down. It felt a bit like a Jenga tower, for instance, that it stands tall. There can be individual flaws in it. You can start taking out individual bricks, and it still stands tall. You can still look up at it, but the more you take out, the more likely it is that tower falls. And this film is like a Jenga tower swaying in the wind. Okay, it really rides that line. Overall, still a very positive experience, but it's precarious and it comes very close to falling apart. I will discuss this a bit more as the review goes on. With reference to the plot, which I just discussed, some comparisons have been drawn by other reviewers between this film and Apocalypse Now, the 1979 Francis Ford Coppola war film. One of my favourite films of all time, actually, it's a film that I might discuss in a future video. Now, it does borrow somewhat from Apocalypse Now. The structure of the film is quite similar. It even has Brad Pitt occasionally narrating the film, which I thought was very similar to what Martin Sheen did in Apocalypse Now. But it's a tale as old as time, really. I mean, this is inspired by Apocalypse Now. Apocalypse Now was inspired by the novel Hearts of Darkness by Joseph Conrad in the early 20th century, which was itself based on Dante's The Divine Comedy, which was itself based on sort of ancient Greek and Roman texts like the Aeneid, the Odyssey, the Iliad. It's basically the literal journey of the character is an allegory for their metaphorical journey, for their spiritual journey, for their psychological journey, and it's one of the most effective ways to tell a story. It lends itself to some really profound thoughts, some profound feelings. It's a really, in my view, it's a powerful way to tell a story, and it's a classic way to tell a story. So I didn't think it was too derivative of anything. I enjoyed that was the way the story was going, because it's simple but effective is the way I would describe it. And I said that the film was quite meaningful, and it is a meaningful film. It is just sadly it's just sadly slightly frustrating in some ways. Um, the core of the film that I really enjoyed was the father-son relationship. I mean, that is the heart of the film, really. Brad Pitt, Brad Pitt's father, Tommy Lee Jones, was never really there for him. He was always immersed in his work before finally being lost to it altogether. And now Brad Pitt plays the character very stoically. He doesn't show emotion, even when he's told that his father might still be alive. His character's well known amongst his peers because even in high pressure situations, his heart rate never goes above 80 beats per minute. So some reviewers characterised the performance as quite poor. I disagree. I think the performance was exactly what it needed to be. He's someone that's you know, emotionally wasn't very catered for all of his life. He always felt like his father was missing, and you know, we see that in his human relationships. You know, there's flashbacks to when he was in a relationship with his wife. You know, he just had that emotional disconnect, and the film really is, for Brad Pitt anyway, is about reconnecting with that and discovering the meaning that he's been looking for all of his life. And I thought that was quite well handled, quite evocative. And I thought his performance was very good. Um, the search for meaning is an important part of the film, and again, it's something that can be um, handled poorly by filmmakers that aren't as experienced and they don't know what they're doing. But when handled in the way it is, when handled quite ambiguously, um, it can be very effective. And I think with both Brad Pitt's character and Tommy Lee Jones, it is really quite evocative in this film. Um, I loved the vision of the future in Ad Astra. I really did. Um, I thought it was quite retro almost. Now this will factor into something later in the film that I didn't actually like, but I thought the design of a lot of the space shuttles and you know things like the spacesuits, the helmets, there's one scene where you see lunar rovers on the surface of the moon. I thought it was very I thought it was very retro. It reminded me a lot of the sort of 60s and 70s space age, you know, with the Apollo missions and Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin. It reminded me a lot of that, which I thought was an unusual way to do it, but it gave the film a unique aesthetic. It didn't feel like I was watching, you know, 2001 or Interstellar. It felt like its own film, which I quite enjoyed. I liked the moon base that they set the film in. So humanity's colonized the moon. They've colonized Mars as well. The moon it looked a bit like some sort of high tech airport. It looked like somewhere like, I don't know, Dubai or Singapore, or what you would imagine those places to look like. Just very clear cut, very a lot of money, a lot of sort of high technology, and you saw all the brands there as well, like, you know, your Subway and McDonald's and things. And if they did have a moon base in the near future, it's something. It felt realistic. It felt like something you could imagine. Um, the cinematography overall was flawless. I really thought it was well done. Um, Looking back in the film, there was something that I didn't notice first time around when I think in terms of viewing the film allegorically, it's clear that they are trying to make it out as though Brad Pitt, while he's on his journey, is going through hell, if you will. I mentioned the Divine Comedy earlier as an inspiration for Apocalypse Now, which is an inspiration for this. And when he travels to Mars, even when he's indoors, they really do use the color red quite a lot. And it reminded me of Apocalypse Now, which didn't use the color red to symbolize hell. It used people in the river, if I remember correctly. So it was more the image of the Greek hell, you know, the river Styx, you know, where all the people are in the river, and the you know, the ferryman's rowing across. It made me think of that, which I thought was an intelligent way to do it. Um, and the scenes of tension throughout the film worked. I didn't have any problems with that. Um, so yeah, overall, the picture that I would paint of the film is positive. I did get a lot from it, and the plot holes. I almost feel I almost feel bad for mentioning them, but they did frustrate the film slightly for me, just because there were quite a few. The first relates to the scene on the surface of the moon. It's set up that there are these sort of rebels and outlaws on the moon, which is a great concept. I mean, that sounds really entertaining. You know, space pirates, space cowboys, whatever you want to call it. Um, and they they constantly like attack cargo and all this sort of thing. But when they're traveling across the surface of the moon, Brad Pitt and Donald Sutherland and the other their entourage, if you will, are all riding these 70s style lunar rovers. And they do look like the lunar rovers the astronauts used like on the 1972 missions, um, completely exposed. And then when the space pirates do come and start, shooting at them and people die, it really felt quite strange that they wouldn't take any precautions against that. Just working with the internal logic of the film, if there was this danger, why just ride completely exposed across the open terrain? And it's a shame because that is quite an effective action sequence. Actually, it was really. I mean, I've never seen an action sequence on the moon, with the possible exception of what was it, Superman 4, the really low budget one where the Superman fights the villain on the moon. But that I don't think that's what they were going for with this film, and it's the first real sort of action sequence on the moon. I liked it even if I was bothered by the logic of it. And I mentioned Donald Sutherland is in the movie. Yeah, I thought that was a very strange casting choice. I don't know if maybe the director really wanted to work with Donald Sutherland, but essentially Brad Pitt's sent off on this mission. He travels to the moon, he travels to Mars, and then eventually travels to Neptune. And they set it up as if Donald Sutherland was going to accompany him that whole way, even though it's like a really okay. Donald Sutherland's an actor who's in his 80s. His character's presumably in his 80s, and he's really going to endure the ardor of space travel at his age. And I remember thinking it was strange in the film, and obviously he doesn't make it very far on his journey, and it was like did no one see that coming? And in the internal logic of the film, again, that I thought that was strange. Um, and also the overall plot of the film. So he travels from Earth to the moon to Mars. The reason he goes to Mars is because it's only from Mars that he can send this transmission of his voice to his father, to appeal to his father to come home and to stop doing what he's doing, and it's causing all the cosmic radiation to come to Earth. Why does he need to go to Mars to do that? I understand they need to be in Mars to send the transmission, but I don't think they really established why he couldn't just record his voice on Earth and someone could send it to Mars to then be forwarded on. I don't understand. It's possible I missed something, but I just didn't think it was really established why that was necessary. But overall, I thought I don't want to go on too long about plot holes because the experience of the film was positive, and these things just individually they wouldn't have bothered me, but collectively they kind of do. And I was disappointed when I first saw the film because the director James Gray came out beforehand and said that he had wanted to make the most scientifically accurate film about space travel that has been made. That's no mean feat. I mean, if you look at things like 2001 or Interstellar or even Gravity, which was a film I didn't really like, but they really tried to make some of these films scientifically up to date and in keeping with what people think is the future will look like. But yeah, this film it doesn't really do that. I mean, if you look at something like Interstellar, I mean, they really took it to the next level with that film in terms of establishing the physics of it all and trying to set it in reality. They looked at things like time dilation and the theory of relativity and black holes and things like that. And it was really, really interesting to see realised on the screen and still be a cohesive plot. But with this film, they didn't really seem to incorporate that. I mean, I mentioned that a lot of the space design seems quite retro and not really in keeping with what it looks like just now. And there's a scene that bothered quite a lot of people, where at the end of the film he travels from Mars to Neptune in the space of like 3 months, which, if you think, the Voyager spacecrafts that were sent out in the 70s, I think only reached the edge of the solar system in like the early 2000s. I mean, it took a long time, but it doesn't bother me really at the end of the day. Forgetting what the director said, it doesn't bother me, because really the film's about the themes, and it's about the creating this outer space world, and I thought that was what worked really well. And the final thing I'll mention before I sort of conclude and give my rating, when Brad Pitt does reunite with Tommy Lee Jones at the end of the film, which is a powerful moment, really really well done. Um, the big twist at the end of the film, so to speak, is that Tommy Lee Jones has discovered on his mission that there is no extraterrestrial life anywhere in the Milky Way. That is his conclusions from being out there, and so he concludes that because of that, there is no God, and he's lost all sense of meaning, which I thought was quite strange. I don't quite know what they were getting at. Maybe, I don't know if they were trying to say that he was crazy, because I mean, even if you were able to prove without a doubt that there is no intelligent life anywhere in the Milky Way besides Earth, I mean, the Milky Way is only one of trillions of galaxies. It's probably safe to assume that there's something out there. And also, I don't understand why discovering that there's no extraterrestrial life makes him not believe in God anymore. Surely the fact, if there were extraterrestrial life discovered, that would be bad for the notion that a God exists, because then suddenly mankind isn't so special. So I don't know what they were getting at with that. I think a more cathartic way to do it would be, he discovers that there's no life in the Milky Way. He hasn't discovered extraterrestrial life. He's not met his life's goal. However, he reunites with his son, and he discovers that really, that was his meaning in life. Reuniting with his family and with Earth. I think that would have been a better way to do it, but again, it doesn't detract too much from the film, because it is so good, and it's just these little individual qualms that I had with it that unfortunately do bring the film down slightly, because when you're watching it, sometimes it is all you can think about. But overall, great film. I really recommend people see this film, because it's unique. It's a meaningful film. And it's one that I will return to again at some point, and who knows, maybe I'll warm to it a bit more. I won't think about the plot holes as much, but it is a very meaningful film. Great performances, great special effects and cinematography, and as a rating, I'm going to give it 68 out of 100. I'm going to give it 68 out of 100, which is a good rating. Yes, I highly encourage people, especially fans of science fiction, to see Ad Astra.